Our topic today is why the LGBT person and community do not exist. And a number of people have asked me, like, Glenn, how in the world can you say that? Clearly they do exist. We're dealing with this. We're confronting this. And so we're going to investigate this question, that when we talk about all things LGBT, LGBTQ, what does that really mean? And what does it not mean? What is it? What is it not? And this is a very important topic, not just for us here at Focus on the Family, and not just for all Christians, but for all good people who want to love others and live in reality of what it means to be truly human as male and female. And this is an important topic for us in our culture today. 1 Chronicles 12:32, this is one of my favorite verses, and it's describing the different tribes of Israel. And it is speaking of this group of people, the men of Issachar, men who understood the times and knew what Israel should do. Now, what's important about that is God places all of us in a certain age and a certain time on the stage of world history. He, in his sovereignty, has chosen to place all of us, all of you, everybody watching this, at this moment in time with its unique challenges, opportunities. And we have to know, just like the sons of Issachar knew the times with understanding of what Israel should do, we should understand the times to know what we should do as human beings, as the church, as God's people. How do we stand faithfully in this unique age? So let's go to this question. How can LGBT people and community not exist? Glenn, what do you mean? We hear this all the time. Nearly it's 24/7 LGBT stuff in culture today. How can they not exist? Well, let me explain to you what I mean. We typically think of, when we hear LGBT or LGBTQ or any of the other alphabet soup letters there, we think these are, in the terms of the phrase, sexual or gender minority people who they were born that way. That's who they are. It's what they are. They're just trying to live their best life now. They want to be a part of society. And, shouldn't we all just come along and help them realize that dream? And in a sense, that ask on their behalf to us is a reasonable ask. But what I want us to know is that that's not really the situation on the ground anymore. And that's what I want to demonstrate to each one of you. That what you think LGBT and LGBTQ is, this is just sexual minorities, gender minorities just trying to live their life. That this is the card that nature dealt them, and that medical science is coming around to show that, yes, these are real things that all of us have to. We may not like it, we may not embrace it, but we have to respect it and we have to recognize it. It's this argument on just equality and accepting everyone. But as I'm going to show, the game has changed. And if we have not been paying attention to how the game has changed, we can be playing one game. This is all about just fairness and people who are just born that way and things like that, when the game has shifted into something completely different. But like I said, all of that is changing.
And finally, new rule: if something about the human race is changing at a previously unprecedented rate, we have to at least discuss it. Broken down over time, the LGBT population of America seems to be roughly doubling every generation. According to a recent Gallup poll, less than 1% of Americans born before 1946, that's Joe Biden's generation, identify that way. 2.6% of boomers do, 4.2% of Gen X, 10.5% of millennials, and 20.8% of Gen Z. which means if we follow this trajectory, we will all be gay in 2054. And then who's going to buy this chair? I'm just saying that when things change this much, this fast, people are allowed to ask, what's up with that? All the babies are in the wrong bodies? Was there a mix-up at the plant, like with Captain Crunch's Oops, All Berries? It wasn't that long ago when adults asked a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? They meant, what profession?
When things change this quick, this fast, this much, I want to burn that in your head. You have to ask the question, and this is Bill Maher, okay? Bill Maher is not in our world, okay? By any stretch, ideologically, but he's asking this question, what is up with this? And that's what we need to understand. The LGBTQ, something is happening here. And we need to understand what is behind it. And he's asking that question. So that's what this talk is going to do, is going to explore this. Let us start with the LGBT person. Let us be very clear. Person, for me, that is such a key word. Person. That means a human being created by God with a story, with uniqueness, with passion, with interests, with hurts, with pains, with expectations. There is nothing more profound and amazing than the human person. Why? Because God tells us very clearly, let us make humanity in our image according to our likeness. Every person bears the image of God. And God says, let us create man in our image and our likeness. Male and female, he created them. The maleness and the femaleness of everybody is a wonderful, beautiful story. So whenever we talk about a person, we are talking about something sacred, something real, something meaningful. When we append to the LGBTQ thing onto that, we ought to ask ourselves, what does that even describe? Is that speaking truth about the person? It is not. No one is an LGBTQ person. How do I know? Because people in the gay community tell us so. This is a friend of mine, a long friend of mine, John Corvino. He wrote in the New York Times in 2015, I'm amused whenever I hear somebody say, as an LGBT person. Nobody is an LGBT person. He's saying this facetiously. He goes, you can have 2, maybe 3 letters maximum at any moment. That would mean you're a bisexual, trans man in a gay relationship, which of course is ridiculous, okay? Another friend of mine, Jonathan Rausch, he has spoken here. He's writing for The Atlantic, and this was a number of years ago. He says it's time to drop LGBT from LGBTQ because these letters are all opposite one another in many ways. And he says, for me, the ugliness and unwieldiness, this is the gay community themselves saying the alphabet soup is unwieldy. For me, the ugliness and unwieldiness of LGBTQ adds insult to injury, as does the fact that it is not a label that accurately describes me or any other American. It describes a coalition, yes, but not any actual real person. He goes on to say, and I love this, he says, imagine if the religious liberty movement instead styled itself the CJMHBSBA+ movement. The symbolism ceases to be about equality because it's describing things that are inherently different from one another. This is the gay community saying this. This is a more recent example of this. A guy named Gary Lucia, he writes at Substack. He's a Disney employee. This was just earlier this year with the Florida parental rights bill. And Florida and Disney was getting in such a mess with all this politics. He is a gay Disney employee, and he says, Disney does not speak for me. And he was actually standing up for Governor DeSantis and the parental rights bill, because he was saying, no, bad stuff is happening. I'm a gay man. But here's what he says. Let me speak for myself. I am not LGBTQ, LGBTQ+, LGBTQIA+. I am gay, just gay. When you refer to me as all those letters, it is offensive to me. You are putting a label on me that I never approved of. You are lumping all these groups of people together, and we are not a monolith. We're going to see this a little bit more in just a minute. And it's interesting how Christians will even say, oh, it's not LGBT, it's LGBTQ. They like to be called the Q. You know what? They don't. If you're including the word queer as part of that label, I am highly offended by that word, which is a slur that has been used to attack me. So what I want to tell you is, do not think that you are doing anybody any favors by referring to the LGBTQ person. The LGBTQ person does not exist. You know what does exist? People with stories. Listen to their story. Your name's Jim. Tell me what your story is, Jim. Help me understand who you are. I'm Glenn. Here's my story. Connect on that level. Another thing is, try to avoid the bumper sticker phrases that are thrown around. Okay, you threw out all these terms that are a part of the LGBT lingo. I don't understand what any of those are. Can you speak to me just, what do you feel? What are your fears? What are your hopes? What are your dreams? What are you hoping for out of life? Talk to people at that level. That's very, very important. So the alphabet soup doesn't really describe any actual person. Rather, it describes an affiliation with a political ideology. And many so-called LGBT people reject that political ideology. You know why? Just like Gary, I'm just a gay man, and I'm just trying to live my life, and I'm not signing up for all these different politics and everything that I don't agree with. Can you just connect with me where I am? And that is important. We don't have to accept everything about everybody, but we should be willing at least to hear their story. We're going to get into that a little bit deeper in just a second. So, let's go to the LGBT community itself. You think, okay, Glenn, now I get the person that there are gay people, lesbian people, bisexual people, this, that, and they're not all a part of the group. But clearly there's a community of all these people, because I see them on TV, I see the marches, all those kinds of things. Well, we have to understand what the word community means. Webster defines it as a unified body of individuals, such as, and all the way down, option D in their definition, a body of persons or nations having a common history or common social, economic, and political interests. The LGBT community does not have common goals. I want to read you something. Douglas Murray is a British intellectual, gay man. He's actually on Fox News quite a lot. In his book, The Madness of Crowds, it's an exploration of gender, race, and identity. He says this. He calls the term LGBT community, and he does this as a gay man. He calls the term LGBT community, quote, a form of absurdity. Why? He says, it may be too pedestrian to even mention, but gay men and lesbians do not always form the warmest of relations. And they do not. We're going to see this demonstrated in just a bit. Neither have very much use for the other, and almost none meet regularly in communal spaces. Even at the gay pride parades, the lesbians will say, almost like a 50s family where the woman rides in the back of the car, okay? Why do we have to march in the back of the parade? Okay? That the men and the women in the LGBT community don't really get along so well. Neither have very much use for the other, and almost none meet in any communal spaces. He adds, there are hardly any places in decades since gay liberation where gay men and women organize or assemble to be near each other on anything like a regular basis. And he's absolutely true. The L's and the G's, they look at the B's and they're like, pick a side already. Stop pretending. You know, they don't really get along so well together. LGBT is certainly not a community, and I want to demonstrate this to you in something that is happening in real time right now. These, what I'm going to show you in just a minute, are screenshots from particular Twitter accounts, and I'll show you the dates. August 27th, that's a little earlier, but I'm going to show you some current ones. See that hashtag up there? That is a tremendously trending hashtag, LGB without the T. Let me tell you why. As a lesbian, I have nothing in common with a movement that claims men can be lesbians and is so determined to turn mostly gay and autistic kids into lifelong medical patients, they drag opponents into court regularly. I want nothing to do with this lunacy. And then this thing up here, you don't have to be a real smart student, but these are people in the LGBTQ community who are saying the trans flag is gobbling up everything. Okay? That's why they want the LGB without the T. Let's start from the bottom here. As a gay man, I have never understood why the T was included in the LGB. This is September 10th. We are not the same. We do not share the same concerns. We are not a community. Somebody writes in, hey, reminder, LGBTW without the T is a hate movement. Are they religious conservatives? No. They are LGB people who are saying we have nothing in common with the T's, and they get labeled with the hate moniker. Okay? This person responds, gay men are exclusively attracted to men, lesbians are women exclusively attracted to women, basic kind of stuff there, right? Non-binary is a nonsense. Everyone is either male or female, okay? Let me ask you this. Do you think it would be fine for a Christian to say non-binary is nonsense? No, that's hateful. Well, the L's and the G's and the B's are saying that themselves, okay? That's my point that I want to get to you. There's something happening within the LGBT community where it's all supposed to be one happy family. It's not. And it gets worse. This person says, maybe it's because of blatant transphobia, you other LGB folks. No one has an issue with some lesbians celebrating being lesbians, but when they use the term exclusive same-sex attraction, that means they are planning to be anti-trans, and no one should accept that. Just yesterday, exclusive same-sex attraction was something to celebrate. Now it's transphobic, all within that community. Mia, and I love her little name here, Crimea River. She's got attitude. According to this guy, lesbians excluding males from their dating pool is transphobic. Same old homophobia in the past, but woke. Okay? Something is happening and you don't know what it is, do you? I mean, like, we need to get this. We need to see this. There is this fight within the community over essentially what it objectively means to be male and female. Now, there are slides through here that I could not show you. They are so vulgar, back and forth, and it's usually the trans against the lesbians. And I wanted to show them to you to see, like, this is how nasty it gets. These are not nice people. But of course, we're in a workplace. We can't show that kind of stuff. But it is remarkable. In a Me Too culture, you cannot say, and rightfully so, you cannot say things to women that are sexually violent. But guess what? The trans men do say them to lesbians without punishment. But the fight is happening here. I love this, okay? Juno Dawson's British young adult writer guy. Leading trans activist Juno Dawson argued gay men are just unsuccessful trans women. Now imagine this. Go into a community and pick out half the community and say, you guys are just play pretending. You're actually unsuccessful trans women. That's not the way to win friends and influence people, okay? But that's what we're seeing here. I love this. And memes are so powerful in what they communicate. LGB without the T is trending. Let's keep it that way. Sexual attraction has zero to do with gender dysphoria and delusions. And the LGB, you know, they're just minding their own business, their sexual attraction kind of stuff. And then this person who's a part of the LGBT community refers to the T and the Q, which is really questioning what it means to be male and female, and other made-up nonsense. Folks, it's okay to call it made-up nonsense, because the LGBT community themselves are doing that, are saying these things. This conflict is happening because of the incoherence of the construct of LGBT itself. The talk that I gave last year on the incoherence of gender theory, that's what all of that was about. And this talk and that talk really come together as sort of a unified whole to help us understand what's happening under our feet with LGBT politics. And the thing that I want us also to understand is that LGBTQ no longer means what you think that it does. And let me reference back to what I said at the beginning. We tend to think, oh, these are people that have unique sexualities and unique gender identities, and that all that is medicalized, that that's the way they are, that science is showing us that, yes, not everybody fits in the cis male and female box, and everybody's different. And we've just got to, as good human beings, try to make a world where there's enough room for everybody. And that plays on our sense of fairness, doesn't it? Our sense of kindness, our sense of, you know what, we want everybody at the table. But that understanding of the sexuality and the gender of things is no longer the understanding that the LGBT folks, the people driving all this, understand it to be. And I want to give you some two dramatic, or actually three very dramatic indicators as to how this is all changing. Lisa Diamond, she is a gender studies professor at the University of Utah. We're going to watch 3 clips of her giving a TED Talk. I actually like her. She is a fantastic scholar because she's honest about what she discovers. And you'll get her vibe very clearly. She is not in our camp. But again, I can say, you know what, I really like her. I like how she does her work. I like the way she presents her work. And these 3 clips are going to show you how, like, oh, okay, she's describing LGBT stuff differently than I thought, differently than what I've been told.
True or false? Sexual orientation is something you're born with. Chances are that if you support LGBT rights, you said true. Surveys have found that people who view sexual orientation as an innate trait, like eye color, tend to be more supportive of LGBT rights. Now, why is that? When asked, folks typically say, well, it's just wrong to discriminate against someone for how they're born. It's like ethnic discrimination. Makes sense. So for years, the born that way argument has been used to promote LGBT equality. Lady Gaga's song, Born That Way, even became an unofficial anthem of the gay community. But there are 3 problems with the born that way argument. First, it's not scientifically accurate. Second, it's not legally necessary. But third, and most important, it's actually unjust. And it's time to retire that argument for LGBT equality. Now, my passion for this issue stems from my own research on sexual orientation. Over 20 years ago, I started a study tracking over time 100 women with different sexual identities. And over the years, I was frankly surprised by some of the changes that they went through. Some of the lesbians ended up involved with men. Some of the heterosexual women ended up getting involved with women. And when these sorts of things would happen, women would say to me that they thought there must be something wrong with them, since their experiences didn't fit the conventional wisdom that sexual orientation is fixed at birth. So that brings us to the first problem with the born that way argument, that it's not scientifically accurate. Now, sexual orientation does often express itself very early and very consistently. But lots of times it doesn't. And it breaks my heart when I hear people express distrust of LGBT individuals who came out late in life, for example, after a heterosexual marriage. People will say things like, how could they not have known all this time? Are they sure that they're really gay? Just imagine how it feels to hear that from someone that you just came out to. But the plain truth is that gender and sexual development show a lot more variability than most people realize. And that variability often leads to change over time in sexual attractions. National and international studies conducted by researchers at Cornell, the Harvard School of Public Health, the University of Virginia, and many others have collectively tracked tens of thousands of individuals for 5, 10, 15 years. And guess what? Sexual attractions show a fair amount of fluidity.
Okay. She just laid out that it used to be this. Now we're understanding that it's this. Lisa Diamond has written some of the most groundbreaking stuff on what they call the plasticity of female sexuality. Male sexuality is a little more set. Men are set on what they want, and they usually don't deviate from that. Women, not so much that way. So when we talk about homosexuality, you have to ask, are you talking male homosexuality or female homosexuality? Because female homosexuality is more opportunistic in the sense of they fall in love with a person rather than fall in love with, if you will, body parts and opportunities, right? And this is what Lisa Diamond has found. It is why I wrote this article in 2017, Why Are So Many Lesbians Getting Pregnant? When I wrote that, a man said, that is logically and biologically impossible. Well, explain it to the lesbians who are getting pregnant, okay? It is only impossible if you think these are clear-cut categories that mean definitive things. In this article, there's research that shows that unintended pregnancy rates and abortion rates are dramatically high, nearly twice as high for women who identify as lesbians than heterosexual women. That is a lot of baby-making sex going on among people who should have no business engaging in baby-making sex. Why? Because of exactly what Lisa Diamond is saying. The categories that we've kind of carved out for ourselves, people don't live that way. Okay? That's significant. And why for us as Christians? Because people are people. They're unique. They're individuals. Don't try to, we get accused of us trying to shove people into boxes, right? Let's be at least willing to hear people's stories and go, oh my goodness, how could you fall in with a guy? You're supposed to be a lesbian. No, people are people. We have complex stories. And sin is real. And sin has a real impact on all of us, right? I also want to say real quick that since that clip from Lisa Diamond, that a lot of scholars who study this kind of stuff have given up on the idea of even sexual orientation itself. This article, they have come up with something different called sexual configuration theory. And Lisa Diamond was one who contributed to this, but others have as well, to say sexual orientation as we generally think of it is not a thing. It's not the thing you think. There is much more fluidity. There is much more, sometimes I'm over here, sometimes I'm over there, than we would like to think. In fact, I'm going to save this for the next clip.
Now for the third and most important problem with the Born That Way argument, that it's unjust. Keep in mind that we first started using this argument in the 1960s and 70s in response to anti-gay activists who said that LGBT individuals were choosing an immoral, deviant, disgusting lifestyle, and so we basically deserved to suffer. Now, this was over 50 years ago, when the hatred of gay people was much more widespread. So it seemed impossible at the time for us to argue, hey, we're not disgusting, we're actually awesome. So instead, we said, we didn't choose this. We were born this way. You can't punish us for something that is not our fault. Now, do you see how that argument just goes along with the notion that being LGBT is a fault? That it's inherently sad and tragic. It's like we have this terrible disease and we need to be pitied instead of punished. Thankfully, times have changed, and if there's one thing that LGBT individuals want now, it is certainly not pity. What we want, what we deserve, is dignity, autonomy, self-determination, and that is our strongest argument for equality. The Born That Way argument is also unjust because it implies that LGBT individuals who fit a certain cultural stereotype, the ones who've been exclusively gay for as long as they can possibly remember, are somehow more deserving of acceptance and equality than someone who came out at age 60, or whose attractions have been more fluid, or who is bisexual, rather than exclusively gay. There's actually a pretty long and shameful history of dismissing and denying the experiences of bisexual individuals. They're sometimes denigrated as not really belonging to the gay community because they sometimes engage in opposite-sex relationships. Now, are you kidding me? We're going to slam bisexuals for having the audacity to make their own relationship choices? Isn't that exactly what the LGBT community has been fighting for all this time? Talk about throwing someone under the bus. And you'd actually need a pretty big bus because all of these large-scale population studies have found that there are actually more individuals out there with bisexual attractions than exclusive same-sex attractions.
Her comment there, I mean, two big things to point out there is she's really kind of arguing against the, okay, we in the community, LGBT community, give those who do not fit cleanly in this box or this box or this box a hard time. We throw them under the bus. Do you see what she's doing? The narrative is changing there. Because we are told, oh no, there's gay individuals and that's what they are and they were born that way and we have to recognize them as that way. And, you know, just like people with brown skin or black skin or yellow skin, you know, we see them and we have to make room for them. Like, yeah. But she's saying, oh no, that's not even true anymore. That no, this is not really the way they are. The way they are is just simply making sexual choices about what they want. Okay? She talked about the bi thing. You know, like my community, her community shuns them because they have heterosexual sex. Okay? And she's saying that's actually a very large community. That goes back to why so many lesbians are getting pregnant. Because the unique, lifelong, exclusive lesbian is very, very, very rare. When you hear the term lesbian, somebody referring to themselves as a lesbian, typically that means I'm in a relationship with a woman now, but I kind of go both ways. This is a book that came out just a few years ago since this talk, and it's written by Rich Savin Williams. She referred to research that's happening at Cornell. Rich Savin Williams is the guy doing that research that she was referring to. And this book is called Mostly Straight: Sexual Fluidity Among Men. This is a new category that Harvard University Press published a book about. And so this is changing, it's fluid, it's dynamic. And they intend it to be that way in many ways. And that's very, very important for us to understand. That, let's go to the third clip with Dr. Diamond.
Either we're a society that protects and defends all individuals' sexual autonomy, or we're not. So the next time you're talking to a friend, or a neighbor, or a teacher, or a doctor, or a politician, or a mother, and they say, I support LGBT equality because, you know, they're born that way. I hope that you'll say, I support LGBT equality just because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
And again, note that switch that is happening. And what we're going to move on to now is that that switch is even continuing in dramatic ways. I want to introduce you to somebody, Eric Kaufman. Eric Kaufman is a sociologist. He teaches at the University of London. He's a younger man. He wrote a paper recently. I've got it right here. You can find it online. You can read it. It's an academic paper. Born This Way, ? The rise of LGBT as a social and political identity. See, Kaufman is understanding this is no longer about the way people are, but how they identify, how they see themselves. I want to read you some quotes from his paper. He says, and this shows how much more dramatic what Bill Maher was talking about, like what's happening here. This is what's happening. And this is very recent. I mean, this was done this year, middle of this year, May of 2020 or 22. When we look at homosexual behavior, we find that it has grown much less rapidly than LGBT identification. Okay, how can that be, Glenn? Aren't they the same thing? Hang on. By 2021, LGBT identification was running twice the rate of LGBT sexual behavior. You're confusing me, Glenn. I'm not tracking with what's going on here. He says, it seems that an underlying psychological disposition is inclining people with heterosexual behavior to identify both as LGBT and very liberal. This is a point that Kaufman makes, that this increasing, mushrooming LGBT identification also goes hand in glove with what he calls a very liberal political ideology. He says those two things are moving together. The most liberal respondents have moved from 10 to 15% non-heterosexual identification, that is gay, lesbian, or bi, in 2016 to 33% in 2021. Okay? Things like that do not happen generally in sociology. What in the world is happening here? And I think a lot of it is what we would call ideological capture. That the way people think, the way they believe, their understanding of reality has been captured by a political ideology. That is exactly what Kaufman in his academic paper is saying here. And get this. Very liberal ideology and LGBT identification are associated with anxiety and depression among the very young. Very liberal young Americans are twice as likely as others to experience these problems. I want to make just a real quick point. At Daily Citizen, I wrote a piece, this was like a week and a half ago, that there was some polling. They asked Democratic identified voters who are female and college educated if a man can have a baby. And I can't remember the specific number, but it was like 36% of college educated white women, Democratic voters, said yes, a man can have a baby. Take one part out of that equation, college educated, white Democratic identified women who were not college educated were about 24% as likely to say that. Go to college and learn that men can become pregnant, okay? I mean, something crazy is happening here. And folks, do not be shy to use the word crazy. I don't mean that derogatorily, it just is, okay? Now, Kaufman's thing about increasing depression and anxiety. In April, The Atlantic had a major cover story, Why American Teens Are So Sad. This is the chart that came from the story. Look, from 2015 up to 2021, who are the most unhappy? The LGBT kids. We were told, oh, it gets better. It's not getting better. Because these kids are being told lies about what it means to be human, about what it means to be the beauty of female, the beauty of male. and it is not impacting them well, even to the point that the Atlantic would report on such things. Now, this is the last set of clips that I want to show, and this is going to show how even more the game is changing under our feet. This is Danielle McClelland. She is not a famous person, but she got to give a TED Talk. She is a playwright. She is a director. She is a trans activist. And I chose her. I'm not quite sure how to articulate why I chose her. And the clips of her do two things to me simultaneously: break my heart and make me extremely angry. And I want to give you permission to feel both of those things. So we're going to go through the 3 clips. And the first clip is the introduction of her talk, okay?
Hey. Hi there. What's going on? What's going round? Okay. I like to flirt. In fact, I may have been born to flirt. But for me, flirting always leads to questions. So here's a few for you. What do you think? Am I a man or a woman? And given that, who do you think I want to flirt with? And how do you think I want you to think of me? Heterosexual, homosexual, male, female? And do you need to know the answers to those questions in order for it to be okay for me to flirt with you? I mean the real questions. Okay, well, me, I'm not so crazy about claims on reality. What I'd much rather do is tell you a story.
2 huge things there. Am I a man or a woman? And do you need to know that in order for me to flirt with you? I felt abused by that. And she essentially says, and if you have a problem, that's your problem. Okay? And then she says, I'm not real hung up on claims on reality. I like stories. And she goes on to tell her story. She said, when I was in college, I was in theater school, and I had a theater teacher that was fantastic. The kind of theater teacher that you just wanted to please her. But my teacher had a problem. People in the class were fighting. They were disagreeing. Chaos, anarchy, all because of one person, because of me, her. She says, people didn't know what to do with me.
Now, every actor knows that the script is just the beginning of the play. And looking at our lives, I know that flat lines are simply not enough. So I would like to suggest that our sexual orientation and our gender identity are not determined on a linear scale. Rather, I'd like to suggest a much more flexible model, where masculinity and femininity are different parts of an identity circle. And heterosexuality and homosexuality are different parts of a sexuality circle. And what you think I am and what I think I am are in constant geometrical tension, always adjusting, always in motion, making up the 3 dimensions of the possibility of me.
What you think I am and what I think I am are in constant tension. That tension exhibited itself in that theater class. And get this, theater students are typically like crazy open to all possibilities, right? But what she's saying here is, I was messing with people. And I was messing with people because I kind of like to mess with myself. And according to the rules, you have to be fine with that. The students in her theater class in a secular university were not so cool with it. Somehow she got a TED Talk. TED Talk celebrates like all of this stuff. And an important point here that I want to point out, we think of transgender as a medical term, a clinical diagnosis, okay? Danielle is transgender, but it's not like just who she is. Okay, the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, very clearly says transgender is a non-medical term. It is, in fact, rather just simply an umbrella term that speaks to anybody who doesn't fit in the norm of what is generally male and female. So when somebody says, I'm transgender, it could mean they are clinically gender dysphoric with a crippling, literally crippling misunderstanding of what their body is in relation to their psyche. That is a clinical thing that should elicit great compassion in all of us because it is crippling to people. Or trans could simply mean I'm a woman, but I just don't see myself as the typical woman. Somebody tell me one time, I'm trans, and like I said earlier, I asked her a question. Tell me what that means. Well, it means I'm a woman. I like men. But I'm not the typical girly girl. So I'm like, okay, I see where this is going. She says, I like to explore. I like to take risks. I like to take chances. I like to get out where nobody has ever gone before. And I said, like Amelia Earhart. She goes, exactly. And I'm like, you're not trans. You're a unique woman. Stop trying to confuse yourself with all of this stuff.
I mean, the scale itself is always changing. What it means to be male or female changes, right? I mean, gay didn't used to be an identity. It used to be an activity. And if all of these things are true, if really our terms are invented, as well as ourselves, then you and me and circumstance and biology are all in this together. And no matter who you are, no matter how typical or how queer, we're all of us positioning ourselves all of the time. And at any given moment, on any given circumference, you might find yourself outside the sphere or smack dab in the circle. But there's always movement, and there's always potential for change. So really, why not? Improvise a little. Don't be afraid to flirt with a possibility every now and then. And in any given moment, if you find yourself witness to an exemplary version of someone else's story, don't miss the opportunity to nod. Thank you.
Okay, so we went from, well, this is just the way some people are, same-sex attracted, things like this, to that. That is play acting. It is play acting. And that is her story. I went online to try to find her story. Her story doesn't exist. All you know is from what she's presenting there, but what she's presenting is male and female change. Terms change. We can go with those changes. I see that a lot. We had a constituent. It was a grandfather, and it was his grandchild who was trans. And so I talked with him on the phone. And as we get into the story, I wanted to know, what are they transing to? And they were non-binary, transing non-binary. And I said, well, what does he or she want to be called? He said, well, that's the problem. They want to be called Andromeda. Okay? Write down xenopronouns, X-E-N-O, and neopronouns. We all know the gender pronouns, ze, zir, that kind of stuff. Xenopronouns and neopronouns are pronouns that describe somebody's alternate identity. Fairy pronouns, bunny pronouns, kitty pronouns. There's a New York Times story about this, and it says, are these serious? Yes, they are serious, because this whole thing is drifting into make-believe. And here's the conclusion. No, the LGBT person and community is not what you have been told. It is shape-shifting under our feet into something completely different. The construct is devolving as we speak, and it is devolving because it does not cohere. It is not related or connected to anything that is actually real. You heard Lisa Diamond say that. It started out as identity politics and what about minorities, and well, this is just the way we are, so feel sorry for us and try to make a way for us in your life. Now that's changing. It's changing to, no, we get to make the choices that we make, and you have to sign on approvingly to each one of them. I want to end you with this, or I want to leave you with this. If anything, if LGBT is anything, it is this. It is a wholly subjective self-declaration that I, the autonomous individual, am set on challenging universal sexual and gender norms in dramatic ways. And I am going to demand that each of you play along with my imagination in every way that I dictate. And if you do not, I will charge you with my potential suicide, with being a transphobe, with being a hater. I mean, this is serious ball that's being played here, because it's ball being played with reality. All reasonable people, not just Christians, not just conservatives. I follow a guy, Colin Wright. He is an evolutionary biologist, hardcore Darwinist. In fact, 1859 is in his email. 1859 is when Darwin wrote Origin of the Species. He's a hardcore guy. He is one of the guys that's speaking against all of this. All people of reason should declare themselves active and unapologetic, conscientious objectors to this illusion. Now, we should always be inclined toward compassion for all people. That should be our default setting. Here's a person in front of me. They've got two eyes. They've got a mouth. They've got a heart. They've got feelings. My intention is to be compassionate toward them, and I want to hear their story. But I must judge that story in relation to something Danielle said she's not all that into, and that is claims on reality. You know what? I've got a huge prejudice about reality. I'm a big fan, and none of us should ever apologize for that. We should always be inclined toward compassion for all people, compassion toward people that have been so lied to so often, they now believe these lies as the new reality. But, and I want to leave you with this, none of us should ever allow the virtue of our Christian kindness to be used against us as a cudgel to force us to tolerate falsehood. Well, if you really loved me, you would accept what I'm saying. No, I can love you and reject what you're saying. In fact, because I love you, I reject what you're saying. Because it's a lie. And much of it, not all of it, but much of it is just pure evil. And Christians have to be as comfortable with the word evil as we are winsome. Okay? Because we live in that spiritual reality. And we should never be forced to employ the language of this falsehood just in order to be nice and to be kind. Love people, but love the truth as well. That's what Jesus did. Full of grace, full of truth. And that is the age that we live in. And the church is called to meet the unique demands of that age with the clarity of truth, but the grace of Jesus Christ as well. And we should not fall. We should understand that LGBT does not exist like we are being told that it does. Thank you.